Hello everyone. Welcome again. I've decided I would take some time to give you guys a bit of behind the scenes for those who are interested in seeing what some of the planning is like for one of these sessions. And I thought I'd go through a recent one, since this was one that I did that did require a bit more on the page planning, as opposed to in my head kind of planning, and kind of show you guys what goes into this process. So we have our quest, Nowhere to Run. A group of criminals fled Canberry. This is obviously a very morally great quest where the party would have to decide what they wanted to do. These quests are important because at the end of the day, it's very easy for our party to come into any situation, clock out of their brains, go to a place, kill the people they're supposed to kill, fight the people they're supposed to fight, and at the end of the day. But in these cases, the party has to choose. They have to decide the kind of players, characters they're going to be, kind of reputation they're going to build, the type of adventurers or spacers they're going to be. So I find these quests to be very important. I organize my quests up here with the quest log entry, name, title, just so I can have that data there. If I need to search and find it, I can reference it easy. Quest number 25, it'll come up if I search it in the bar, so that makes it easy. Location, Toro Verde, I kind of put a little blurb, underground community, Albion, Canberry Coast, Stone Bloom Forest, just to make sure that this is connected there and remember things for later. Then we go to the summary. Honestly, a lot of the times notes are more for me to remember things than they are for I've got to make sure that I have this all written down. It's much more that if I don't have it written down, there's a chance I might forget, and kind of keeping me on track with things when we're running this large of a campaign. A lot of details are being moved around, and I need to keep those track. So, in a situation like this where there's a lot of NPCs, a lot of details, characters, and backstories, I'll have to write out a lot more. The summary is usually what I write, again, mainly for myself. Something that I have at the start of the session, the structure of the quest. This is not something I would read to the players at the start because it also includes background information. But if something happened and I needed to run a session off the seat of my pants, and I didn't have that much prepared, the summary is at the very least the core of the quest's idea and concept. And a lot of times when I'm creating quest log ideas, I'm creating the summary in anticipation of those quests. That way I have a general idea, somewhat the backstory, because it's very easy for me to create a quest and then that quest not get chosen for a few months, and then we forget why I made that quest that way. But anywho, we've got our involved NPCs. You can see they're tagged here. If you haven't used Obsidian, I'll explain how that works in a little bit. But essentially, we've got our characters, our NPCs, our PCs. A lot of times I'll just put really important characters or the characters who are probably going to come up again. I'll tag them and put brief little blurbs so I don't have to go into their file to see them. And that'll help me keep in mind who's who, what's what. Obviously, we went with a very Italian named naming convention for this session, but I'll also include the player characters. That way I know who was in that session, who went with what characters. And then I'll usually have the detailed descriptions. The detailed description is usually where I'll put everything else that I don't want to have memorized or in my brain. A lot of times in cases like this where we have this full community with named characters, there's an exact amount of people who are in here. It's very easy to get confused of who's who. So basically, for the detailed description, we'll have to go much more in depth. I do write a lot of this stuff on day of. But yeah, I also put some of the characters I thought would more likely be encountered or were more important, so that would have a little blurb here. Ivana, the matriarch, formerly known as Zuzu Fresh, Enzo, de facto leader. The party didn't reach Alessandra, but maybe they'll meet her on some other time. Communities like engineer and builder. But yeah, that's kind of how that works. So this also shows you the level of detail I need to build things out in order for a session to feel comfortable, to make sure that I kind of am familiar with everything is. I don't need to have everything memorized, but at least I need to know where to find the information. So we have our basics here, kind of the leaders of the community. Even though the party wasn't here for Alessandra, she still was a community leader that I need to have reference that one of the other NPCs might have her bring up. But yeah, so you can see kind of seeing through the list, there's a bunch of other NPCs. Clara Fontana, the two young children, Leo and Elena. Um, like I said, I need to write down all these names. I need to write down a brief blurb of them because all of these characters do have a backstory. All of them do have things and going on in their life, goals, ambitions, and so especially for a West Marches campaign, every NPC is someone who you meet, someone who you might get involved with, someone whose story might help to shape and enrich in the world. Because I never know who the party's gonna connect with or click with, or who certain players may interact with and like and dislike. So we had Clara and Leo and Elena who came up during that session. But I also needed the background understanding of like if the party spoke to Clara and they spoke to Clara and started getting to know her. She might reference other characters and other things. Um, so in this case for this session, I don't really know how you guys are going to approach things. I don't really know what the outcome is going to be. I set things up and I tend to view sessions as like either movies or TV episodes with a typical 3-act structure. Sometimes there are more acts that are necessary, but that's where I would start. So all of this is really just the background information that I would have so I can feel comfortable in the quest and knowing that I'm well informed. Then is the actual act. This part is the part that I think is the most superfluous. A lot of this I usually can keep in my brain, or if I know we're gonna have a battle, I'll just have the monsters already preset on my DM screen, so I don't need to keep them all on my list here. But let's say for Act 1, like I said, a lot of things are open-ended. So I don't know where things are gonna go. Your characters are exploring through the Stonebloom Woods. Given the details of the quests, there are times where I don't need to write a lot of things down, but in this case, I wanted to have indications and clues that would show that there was a community living here, that Nico, who was, you're a young man who scouts the forest for threats and resources. Maybe our party decides to approach from a different direction. They go into the forest and maybe they find markers. They find signs that there's a hunter or some kind of ranger traveling through the woods around here. Maybe it's our sign that there's someone here. Again, a lot of time I leave these things very open-ended. I have no idea how you guys are going to approach things. So for this quest, like I said in the beginning, party may have decided to kind of run in, kill all the criminals, and that's it. I always come into these situations with the understanding that like that may be the outcome. So I never really commit myself to any one approach. I mainly have the scenario presented and see how things go from there. So, like I was mentioning, I kind of had the idea that party would battle the mutated Kongamato, and basically just having this link here, I can open up 5e tools. I can open up my DM screen, see the character sheet there, but I also had that the party may encounter members of the community separated. So let's just say, for example, Nico is out in the forest hunting, searching for things, searching for food. I had Clara and her kids on another section of the forest where their father had been killed by the Kongamato. I also had edited the Kongamato to kind of give it a few extra abilities, make it more like a mutated creature. I also had Julia Romano, a former nurse who's like the community healer, who was a potential person who could be encountered, maybe out looking for herbalist supplies and things like that. So again, I never knew who the party was going to interact with. It really depends on where they approach the region from, because again, the players can choose where they're starting this quest from and how they're going to approach it. And even those little decisions, those choices of like, yeah, we'll start here, that can have such a great impact on the rest of that session. So they could have, decided to come in, go to a certain area. Maybe they wanted to go stealthy and try to see if they spot anyone hiding out in the field. So the region, it could have been, quest could have been approached in many different ways. Could have camped out. Maybe they could have pursued Nico back to the lair. Maybe Nico would have thought he was being pursued by criminals, and maybe they would have fought. Maybe they talk to Julia and maybe she doesn't trust them. Maybe she tries to poison them. There's so many opportunities and ways that this could have gone. So that's kind of where we were for the journey. But like I said, these acts are very loose. Act one, act two. Act one being the journey and fighting the Kongamaru. Act two being, I imagine, like the discovering. I thought they would discover the entrance. Like I said, I thought they would like kind of be scouring the fields. Um, but instead, they heard some voices and decided to go after those voices. And just like that, everything else was influenced by that outcome. We had Jan, who rolled a really good perception, who has very high passive perception. And if he wasn't on that quest, maybe there's nobody who's very perceptive. Maybe they hadn't heard the young family playing by the stream. Maybe the quest would have gone incredibly different. But I did know a few things. I did know that the fugitives don't attack just off the bat, that they would welcome the party cautiously. They're all fugitives. They're all people who have run away. I knew that Giovanna Vespri, she would try to explain to them the conditions of the cannery, how she had seen desires for freedom. I knew that Enzo would be the most likely to fight. He defends their decisions to flee. He insists they've harmed no one, but harm can incur if needed. So Enzo kind of being like the person who might push things to a fight. And then Act 3 being the moral dilemma. Of course, this was a part I knew that was going to be the most divisive, but also it's where the players do the things they're supposed to do, make choices and influence their environment. So I kind of had different alternatives they could bring, or ideas and concepts. Again, none of these things are like, I want the party to do this, but more like these are possibilities that I try to prepare myself for, because I need to be ready for it. Like, what if the party decides we're going to bring all of them back? What and get everybody? What if we decide we're going to just fight these people? And I also had that Enzo, Silvio, and Frankie, one of the other residents, may resist capture. Basically, there'd be a fight. These people have been living out here in the wilderness a bit by themselves. It may be tough. There's an option of letting them stay free, defying the party's orders, letting them remain hidden. Let's have our quest fail. That's it. There was also an option they might negotiate a compromise. Maybe some of them come back. Maybe they talk to the mayor. The party did just recently save the mayor's life, and stop the Canberry harvester, the kind of a serial killer that was in the city. So, maybe they would have used that their newfound clout to kind of go to the mayor and say, hey, we want you to change these things. Again, I don't know. Or maybe they would ally complete with the fugitive community. Maybe they would start working with them and saying, like, we're going to get you guys other people and get you supplies, get you things. The actual outcome, I wrote a little bit down here. They reported back that they claimed that Silvio and Enzo were killed in battle. That they brought Nona Uzu Fresh back to Canberry, but Jan paid her debt. So we'll see if she makes another appearance and what that leads to. But I mentioned earlier the links and things like that. That's kind of like what I've got with each of the characters. So just if you haven't seen Obsidian before, it's really cool, because if I go and I click on Jan, it'll bring me to Jan's page. I've made this and kind of sectioned it out here. It has his name, pronouns, his kind of concept. A lot of this is what's put in the Dramatis Persona, which is why I keep it there, so I can have an easy way to reference it and things like that. If they get earn items and goals. Right now, there's not too much here, just because nothing has been so solidified that I'm like, yes, this is inherently attached to Jan, except for Jorah Blackwell. Jorah Blackwell, they met in the Citadel. Jan and him have a few interactions that they've kind of creating, I guess, in allyship or partnership. So that's kind of how that would work. And it also lets me see, if I want to look at the quest that Jan has been on, linked mentions. These are all the quests, and I can also see like other characters they may have talked to, what may have happened. Jorah Blackwell told Jan about the location of the turtle constellation located in the dead zone near the planet Sol. So like that's included in the notes there if I ever need to reference it. When players have their goals and their things like that, I can put those in there. So Obsidian's pretty fun, pretty great to work with. But yeah, that's all the planning that can go into a session. Like I said, there can be less sometimes when especially in cases where it's like, I know, all right, you're gonna have these battles. In those cases, my preparation is more setting up the map, setting up the pieces, picking my combatants and seeing what kind of things they'll use, and familiarizing myself with their stat blocks, because it can be difficult to run battle when you have like 6 different creatures who all have different stat blocks and abilities and whatnot to keep track of. But yeah, And then of course there's the actual map making, which in this case I already had um, kind of a map for this place already, sort of picked, but I still had to go in, put all of the dynamic lighting into place, do all of that work. So yeah, there was a lot. There was a lot of stuff. Um, Here's the map that I was using, just so you can kind of see how big it is total. I see our players could have gone through here. They had like little hideaways and stuff. So fun session. Like I said, map making can be like one of the longest parts, and I kind of have to block off a time period where if I'm not careful, I could spend way too much time on it. But also, uh, I wasn't sure if the party would sneak down here and have a fight. I needed to have the map ready. If they did have a fight, if people did start running, I needed to have things going on. But it's also a pretty big map for a pretty big community that's living down here. So I thought that would be a good way to show that. And I also wanted to have a kind of underground community that was starting out, literally underground. Because in our last campaign, with the lore of the world, there specifically weren't any like underground civilizations or cultures like that still existed. And obviously in this world, like I'm sure if we go to like the dwarven home world and things like that, we'll find some. But in this world, or at least local, I wanted to have something become its own thing, this sort of independent. Maybe they become their own independent republic or something later on. But yeah, that's pretty much the thought I had going into creating this. So again, I never know how things are going to end up. I never know when he's going to break out into a battle. But I hope you guys found that all informative. Hope that was helpful. I will see you next time.